Thanks so much for inviting me on this early morning to speak with you today. So I'm Rob Henderson. I'm from Ottawa. Please hold your applause to the end of the presentation. And we're used to bringing hot air to places we visit. So it's a refreshing change in Edmonton, but I got to say, it's probably one of the first times that I've seen where somebody had weather worse than Ottawa. So I'm talking about BioTalent Canada today. We're a national not-for-profit association. We're independent, though we are BioTalent Canada. We're an independent nonprofit. And essentially what we do is we do a lot of labor market research to find out what skills deficits exist across Canada. Sometimes we work provincially or regionally. Largely we work with national focus. And then we work with different governments, municipal, provincial often, and federal, to try to address those skills gaps. So I hope everybody can hear me. Like I said, I'm from Ottawa, so I never use 50 words where 500 can do. So we'll have some time for questions at the end, but let's talk a little bit about the bioeconomy. So the bioeconomy, if you ever use the word the biotech industry or the bioeconomy, you'll find there's as many definitions from people that they have all over. People in biofuels think that's the bioeconomy. People in the life sciences, that's the bioeconomy. We take an inclusive definition, and there's a reason for it, because it's based on science. Based on the whole idea of biology and bioorganisms, biological and biotechnological processes. So the elephant in the room, so to speak, is the large subsector of biohealth. That pretty much employs about 80% of the people within the larger sphere of the biotech industry in Canada. However, there are three other subsectors which are very important to consider: bioenergy, agrobiotech, and bioindustrial, for a few reasons. Number one, they're very much ingrained in sustainable development and sustainable development technology. Second, they're very, very important in terms of government policy making. And actually, third, they also will require a lot of the same talent that the biohealth sector does. Now, three little subsectors that you can see that I put squares around were already talked about a little bit today. First one is e-health and artificial intelligence as it pertains to health. This is really important when you're talking about talent to keep this in mind, because you've got an IT sector that has 2% unemployment in it across Canada, the IT sector. They're hungry for people. They don't have enough people. E-health is burgeoning. We all know that artificial intelligence is coming, and artificial intelligence is somewhat industry agnostic. In other words, they need computer programmers and software developers within that thing. They don't care which industry they're going to work. Now, obviously, they have to complement that with scientists, physicians, medical professionals in order to exert their efforts within the biotech and the health sector. However, they don't care where they're going to get the talent, and they'll come after your people to get it. Okay? So we have to realize that this is a sector that's burgeoning. The second one is medical cannabis. I can tell you right now, this is huge. Now, the thing that's interesting about the medical cannabis, it's a bit like the bioenergy sector, where now that cannabis is legalized, the recreational cannabis producers are dabbling and are doing a lot of investment in the medical cannabis field. It forms a part of their strategic plan overall, much like how bioenergy forms part of the strategic plan for some of the larger oil and gas producers, or some of the largest players in the field. So the thing about medical cannabis, and I can tell you from experience, because I just lost my business development manager to the cannabis industry 2 weeks ago, they're coming after your people. And they're coming after a lot of the business skills that they require. Business development, marketing, communications, HR. And the third sector I want to talk about is sustainable development, down in the lower right-hand quadrant. This is really more about bioremediation than it is about sustainable development technology, which is pretty much covered by its own subsector. However, the reason why you need to see that is that the biotech sector and the biotechnology industry is overlapping with other sectors more than ever before, and that's not going to stop, which means the whole idea of somebody being in the biotech industry and dedicated to the biotech industry and not going to other industry and not being industry agnostic, that is going to go away, which means we've got to up our game, because traditionally, we're not really good at HR. We really are not. So I want to talk a little bit about BioTalent Canada. As an independent organization, what we have done is amassed 52 different corporate partners, some of which are the largest industry associations in the world, in the country. I'd like to be in the world, but it's in the country. Innovative Medicines Canada, for example, represents the largest research-based pharmaceutical companies in Canada. As we go down, you can see BioAlberta, the Industry Association for Life Sciences here in Alberta, is one of our partners. This represents pretty much the largest biotechnology network in Canada. It allows us to reach municipally, regionally, provincially, and nationally, that is really unrivaled. That's how we work. And it's been a really interesting model because as a result, federal governments and provincial governments have come to us because of the company we keep. Now, what's interesting on the bottom here, you see those showcase employers. These are some of the fastest growing small and medium-sized enterprises in Canada. They're growing by double-digit growth every year. Stem Cell Technologies, for example, in Vancouver, is Canada's largest privately owned biotech company. They're growing by 15-20% every year. And the interesting, what they all have in common, they're all over Canada here, what they all have in common is they've embraced HR as a business strategy. It's not a pain point. They understand that's how they attain their business objectives. Complementing that set of corporate partners, we've added academic institutions across Canada as academic partners. Why? Because it's absolutely ridiculous not to partner with the supply side if you're only dealing with the demand side. So we're dealing a lot with the academic partners. Now, juxtapose this to the opportunity that sort of presented itself and arisen in the last year. We do a lot of labor market research. Our current report in 2018 gave a provincial snapshot across the country of the life sciences and biotech industry across the country. This is important, and I urge you to take a look at it because we have some information there all about Alberta provided to us by our partners from BioAlberta, which is very interesting in terms of the number of companies, the 3,800 employees that are employed here. Are we okay there? All right. And it's important for Alberta and for Edmonton Health City to understand how they sit in the biosphere, in the environment. Because as much as you're collaborating with other governments and collaborating, you're competing. And you're competing for talent. And that's the reality of the situation. You're competing to groom them locally. You're competing to attract them federally and internationally. And you're competing to retain them. Okay? Which is often one of the biggest things that are overlooked, especially by biotech companies. They're all about the attraction. They're all about the recruitment. They suck at retaining, a lot of them. And there's a good reason for that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the key national stats. The two greatest challenges, business challenges facing biotech companies are access to capital and access to talent. Notice the wording I just said that, access to capital. It's not necessarily the existence of capital. It's access to capital. In other words, the talent quotient is also included in access to capital. Why is that? Because we all know we've met CEOs who can't pitch. We've met executive leadership who lack some of the basic business skills and entrepreneurial skills to be able to advance their business case. So in other words, it's actually not capital and talent, it's talent number one, capital's number two. 53% of current biotech businesses across the country are reporting talent shortages. Now, 80% of biotech businesses across the country are small and medium-sized enterprises, okay, less than 50 employees. 19.5%, however, we have new grad unemployment. So think of those two statistics. 53.5% are reporting talent shortages, and 19.5% is our current unemployment rate amongst biotech new grads. So what's our problem? Our problem is our post-secondary institutions are not graduating the kind of employees that the industry needs. QED. That's the bottom line, which is why we're working with academia to try to solve that problem, and I'll go into that in just a moment. 60% of science grads are women, yet the employment of women over the last 10 years in biotech companies has fallen by 11%. Why is that? We're the most educated industry in the world. Those who innovate, you have to learn the rules before you can break them. A lot of times you have to have a master's or PhD. Many women are graduating right in the middle of their reproductive years. And at the time, being in a small startup, it's arduous. It's not a very good work-life balance. It's a lot of that. So how do we overcome that? We're losing access to the largest labor market from our new grads. And then finally, 300,000 Canadian immigrants coming in 2018 that have already arrived. And this is going to grow. How are we tapping into that strategically advantageous labor market? These educated immigrants have skills that are easily transferable into the bioeconomy. Not only that, they have access to foreign markets and bring in different cultural ideologies that can actually make a business objective more robust and a strategy. So how do we do that? Juxtapose that whole environment with what's going on and what has happened in the last little while. HBEST is the Health and Bioscience Economic Strategy Table. These were a series of strategy tables that were announced by the federal government to see how they could enhance economic development in different subsectors. This was about health and bioscience. Their target was, or they've decided to put out a bold goal of increasing health and bioscience exports to $26 billion a year and doubling the amount of companies to 1,800. What was interesting about this is that probably from my experience, and I've been with BioTalent Canada for 7 years, this was the first federal initiative that said, you know what, we got a talent problem. And I said, no, really? I wish there was somebody who had been saying this all the time. But what is interesting is they're realizing that talent is the beginning, not the end game. You have to start with the talent. So some of the recommendations they came up with was that industry and academia must work together to address the skills gaps. It can't be just academia teaching the theory of science. It has to be the industry forcing and coercing the colleges and universities to teach the business of science. Increasing work-integrated learning placements, co-ops, internships, and the like. These are fantastic. The statistics show that the retention rate amongst companies who hire the co-ops is huge, and these are amongst some of the most trained employees. They overcome that skills gaps better than people who have not gone into work-integrated learning placements. Develop a skills hub where skills gaps can be contained and that other organizations can tap into in terms of training and professional development, and concentrate on executive talent, as we mentioned before. Develop accessible and up-to-date labor market intelligence and enhance access to skilled newcomers. All makes sense. Grooming the retention base, grooming the attraction base, and grooming the advantageous labor markets that are around. So a little bit of what BioTalent Canada is doing in light of these recommendations. Last year, we launched the Student Work Placement Program, which is a $9.1 million wage subsidy program, had two components. One was wage subsidies, and the problem with wage subsidies is it's a Band-Aid solution. You're not approaching the problem. All I'm saying is I'm going to bribe you to take somebody that you otherwise wouldn't hire. That's really what it is. And as soon as you turn off the money, the problem still exists, right? So we added a second part, which is industry-driven curriculum enhancements. We're working with 12 of the largest, or the fastest growing employers across the country and 20 academic institutions to get the industry to say, these are the skills that we need. Modularized curriculum enhancements that can be dropped into curriculum or used independently by co-op offices so that these students graduate with better skills. And they'll launch in 2020. These come directly from the HBEST recommendations. We launched a national labor market research project. Launched in 2018, we're going to be generating 9 national reports, 1 national, 5 regional, 3 cluster reports. And I know we're already working with Edmonton Health City to see what we can do here for Edmonton specifically, because obviously the more granular the information, the more valuable it is. We're also going to be launching an online LMI portal. We're going to be doing the first industry census. Somebody will finally know how many companies we have in biotech, the way we define it, and how many employees. And then finally, we're going to be doing the first supply side survey. So we're going to be actually talking to the academics about the skills that they're inculcating into our students and what they think they're going to have to do in the future. I wanted to end the presentation with a little story. One of our showcase employers on the West Coast was doing a job fair. And they were hosting it on the weekend because everything was so busy, and they just thought they were expecting a big turnout, and they knew they could use their own cafeteria in their head office to host this. So sure enough, it was around noon came along, and everybody was going on. They didn't expect it to go beyond noon. And so the recruiters and some of the people that were there, they're going, look, everybody's getting hungry. What's going on? And he goes, well, let's order some pizza for everybody. So sure enough, they called up a local pizza place, and somebody came over in 14 extra large combinations. Sure enough, about 45 minutes, pizza guy comes to the front door, knocks on the door. It's locked, of course. Somebody has to come out, and he goes, yeah, what's going on? And he goes, oh, we're hosting a job fair here. He says, we went too long, and we needed some food. And he goes, you guys are hiring? And they said, yeah, why? And he goes, because I got a master's in biotechnology. So the showcase employer hired the pizza guy 2 weeks later. The moral of that story, and these are the stories we hear all the time, it is a people industry. And we have to be open to the kind of talent wherever it appears. And if I have to say that one piece of advice, I would say to Health City in terms of its talent strategy is you've got to look for the talent. You can't just assume it's going to come to you. Science is the study of the natural world. There's only one species on Earth that can study. So there's no science without people. And I think a lot of biotech employers get that in reverse, where they deal with the science first and they assume that the people will come. Biotech businesses are not only in the science business, they're in the people business. And if you're in the people business, it means you're competing with every other industry in every other part of Canada and every other part of the world. And we have to embrace that. If we don't become people experts, we will fail. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Rob, for that presentation. I welcome all of your questions. I'd just like to start with a few myself. So Edmonton really does have the capacity to leverage its strengths and excel in health innovation. So what do you think we need to do to ensure we are the leaders in health innovation?
You know, the leaders, in my experience, the leaders are not the smartest people in the room. They're the ones that the smartest people in the room want to work with. So for a couple of things, the biotech businesses that I know, they're so concentrated, because 80% of their SMEs, they're so concentrated on their work, on their science. They're ill-equipped to deal with things like grant preparation, tax breaks, tax credits, and HR. So I think that if Edmonton Health City, like if you can gather to you all of the components so that the businesses here that you know that you guys are the hub that they can go to for those kinds of answers, and that you promote best practices from them, because I'm talking only about talent at this point. Some of them are so ill-equipped to be able to attract and retain the talent that they have. I mean, right now we have a workforce where 65% of the people that work actively today would choose a different manager over a raise. That's a statistic from Harvard Business Review. That's a big problem. If we are not equipped to attract and retain the best people, we will fail. So I think that as a leader, I think if you put the talent question first and foremost, that is the best leadership capability you can give. Because if you start with the talent, I think it was Reg who stated, if you start with the talent, the money will follow. Money follows talent, right? It's not the other way around.
Thank you. My next question is about retention. So how do we go about not just being an incubator, but also a place where people want to stay and want to invest in Edmonton on the long term?
That's a very large question, because some of the other areas of Canada that have had the same issue, Saskatoon, and I've worked with them, Saskatoon, PEI, Halifax, retention is a big issue. And what they are trying to do is work with a lot of the other agencies that serve some of the strategically advantageous groups that they work with. For example, in Halifax, their Immigrant Employment Council that works there has a roundtable that deals with a lot of the biotech companies across to make sure that they understand what cultural needs are being required by the newcomers that they're hiring. So if you don't understand the needs, you're not going to be able to meet them. So that's number one. Number two, the cultural communities, when you're talking about, because employees aren't singularly, it's also families. So you have to make sure that there's a background of cultural diversity and associations behind that to be able to lead. We have found a good organization that I would say, Irving Oil, is one that out in the east that has said immigration is fundamental, and attracting newcomers fundamental to their HR strategy. They work themselves as an employer with immigrant serving agencies, and I know here in Edmonton, the Edmonton Regional Immigration Employment Council is very active here, works with BioAlberta and stuff. So I think those are great models where some of the infrastructure you have here is already here, but you have to tap into it, especially if you're going to, because it is a question of attracting is just the first part. It's the retention. Because if you don't retain them, the costs go up and you're right back to the drawing board at the beginning. So I'm glad, thanks for the question. I hope I answered it.
So speaking of which, could we have a representative from Eric stand up, just so that if we have questions for you later? Right, so if anybody has questions about tapping into that immigration market.
Absolutely.
Great. I'm looking for questions from Slido now. Oh, there they are. Okay, I was looking at that screen back there and I'm like, those are all tweets. Would you like me to read it to you? Or?
Sure, please.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned HR being a vital to retention, but oftentimes HR won't take a chance on PhDs or MSCs. Where did that go now? Okay.
I think I saw the question.
Yeah, the rest of it is why won't they take a chance on PhDs and MSCs in a non-science environment?
There we go.
That's a two-sided question, because once it sort of assumes an industrial bias against MSCs and PhDs. I'd argue the opposite. And the thing is, I would say, if I've hired upwards of 150 people in my career. If it's an MSc or a PhD, if they think that's all I'm looking for at a job interview or on a curriculum vitae, they're sorely mistaken. So I would put the thing back saying, if it's MSc, I don't believe that you're being prejudiced against because you are highly educated. I really have not seen that very often, especially in biotech, who actually prefers much higher educated people in biotech companies, sometimes overeducated. However, it's the soft skills and the essential skills, the persuasion skills, the communication skills, the leadership skills, the project management skills, all of those skills. And I would challenge the person saying, I would say 98% of the time, that is what's lacking. It's not a prejudice against education. It's what's complementing it. Is it there or not?
So is half the battle then for PhDs and MSCs the ability to communicate the skills that they have in a way that the audience of HR will understand?
Absolutely. There's no question that the industry right now, the biggest skills gaps that are facing highly educated graduates are soft skills. And they're not getting it. And the academia agrees. We're not giving them presentation skills. We're not giving them, that's not something we do. And a lot of these people went into science because they didn't want to do presentations. They didn't want to sell. They wanted to work in a lab. They wanted to do research. So for them to be able to understand, especially if you're working with an SME, where the last thing that defines what you do is your job title, like you're chief cook and bottle washer for a small company, right? You're doing all sorts of things, right? Proposal writing, all sorts of these things. Those are the skills that they're going to have to work on, not their scientific research skills. The MSc and the PhD, you sort of realize you can do research when you have those letters after your name.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions here? Can you comment on industry trends across Canada with regards to virtual companies employing foreign C-level executives who don't move to Canada? Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, that's a bit of the, that's sort of akin to the expat issue. The biggest, some of the success for a lot of organizations and incubators and support organizations that have worked for municipalities that are sort of modeled after Edmonton Health City is to tap into government programs and national agendas. We have a government in place in the federal government, we have provincial governments that are trying to find jobs for educated immigrants who have come to this country. We're also trying to alleviate unemployment that is a very big rate for our young people, and to make sure that the biotech industry is also being populated by women and by Canadians with disabilities, Canadians who possess disabilities. Hiring foreign executives is a bit like a wage subsidy issue. It's a Band-Aid solution. It does not systemically attack the problem, and it's not sustainable because just like the expat, in my opinion, the expat issue is these people left Canada or are not coming to Canada for a reason. So if we're trying to build a bioscience community, the first question that you asked me, Amy, was how do we promote retention? We promote retention by hiring people who want to stay here. Especially leaders. So I would say it's certainly a quick fix for one single company, but the message that you may be sending from a cultural perspective to your people is that we'd be glad, absolutely, we reward people who leave. or that doesn't make any difference. And I'm not sure that that's the best message long-term for a bioscience or a health community. It's simply a quick fix. That's in my opinion.
Something that you mentioned, we have a question in the audience there. Something that you mentioned just now about supporting the people who come with the talent. So the families or the children that come with those people. At the U of A, we do have a program where when we recruit a foreign professor, we are supporting their partner or their spouse, and we're providing them with those career services so that they have what they need in order to stay as well. So if anybody's interested in learning how we go about doing that and the services that we provide, I'm happy to talk with you about that after.
I applaud that because I think the whole idea, we've all heard the thing, happy spouse, happy house, that's the thing. A lot of educated immigrants and educated newcomers may be very happy in their job. If the family life is not, if they're not plugged in to their own cultural or recreational community, or the spouse cannot find gainful employment, it's not going to work.
Right.
And statistics bear that out. Sorry.
We have a question over here.
My question to you is just on the talent side, and that it's a quick fix to bring in somebody from outside. So I consistently hear that we do not have that kind of talent, especially in the biotech life sciences side in Canada. You mentioned, researchers that can't pitch and present, and we see this all the time. I live in Silicon Valley. So if it's a quick fix, do you think that how do you convert that to a longer-term solution then? Or are you saying we don't do that? Because
No, I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying don't look at it as a long-term fix. And you're right. If we have the talent deficit now and you've got a 5-year business plan, well, what are you going to do? Wait 5 years for the problem to? Of course not. And I understand why people do it. My point is just like wage subsidies. When we've worked with the government, it's the same idea going, can you stop putting a Band-Aid on this and can we fix the problem?
how do we fix the problem?
Well, and the problem, a couple of things. In terms of some of the talent that you're talking about, not only from an academic perspective, but from an industry perspective, we have to inculcate those skills that are entrepreneurial. I mean, some of these people have these skills. Why are they not in Canada? It's not endemic to Canada? No, it's because they've gone to some places where the investment environment was more conducive for them to be able to practice their skills in a more lucrative manner. And that's understandable. But at the same time, that doesn't mean, the skills came from here. There's a whole bunch of expats that had those skills. Why? Because I think some of the capital investment environment and some of the planets were not aligned that they could stay. And the new ones can't do it. I mean, if you don't have the opportunity, it's very difficult to get those skills. But the problem is as well, is that we're not grooming entrepreneur skills, is just that. So the long term is working with the academics, putting in executive leadership skills now, teaching people. And here's the big problem. CEOs are in biotech are notoriously, they will not admit they have an ugly baby. And what I mean by that is you could put on an executive leadership skills on how to pitch, no CEOs will show up. Why? Because they don't want to admit they've got a problem. That's why. So you need the venture capitalists and you need the boards and the directors to say, by the way, we love you, sit down, you need to listen to this. Okay? And that's a big problem because right now the CEOs, it's up to them to implicate themselves, self-implicate. They don't do it.
So we have another.
Are you cutting me off, Reg? Okay.
Okay, there's one question at
Reg
the bottom.
Joseph is also the chair of my board, by the way. So if
you
you're
gotta-
going to be critical of my presentation, please check the name badge at the person that you're talking to, okay?
We'll take the question at the bottom of the screen here. How are you supporting young innovators? And I'm assuming you as in the greater organization.
Yeah, that's a good one. The brutal and short answer to that question is we're not. And we're suffering from for a couple of reasons. It's very difficult to identify them, and we're bad at it. The academics, we bell curve everyone. Everybody takes the same courses. They have to pass the same things. If somebody shows a propensity towards those entrepreneurial skills of problem solving, and having a propensity towards those essential skills, we don't have, unless they switch a program that is designed for that, we don't have a streaming process to be able to identify them and put them into that. Now, sometimes it happens because you have really forward-thinking professors, but that's very hit and miss. So the problem is that we don't have innovation streams within our academic programs that are able to say, if you see students that show these propensities, you have to do that. Because sometimes what we're taking is we have 50 people, let's see if we can turn 3 of them into innovators. And I'm not sure that's the right approach. I think you have to see some of these innovators and these entrepreneurs. You see, there's that fire, there's that ability to pitch in her eyes, and you know that that's where she's going to go because, but we still force them to take all of the same courses and all the same programs. That's a big difficult for us. So I think we're going to have to look at innovators and entrepreneurship in a very different way, and we have to stop bell curving everyone.